friends, welcome back. Today we have a fun project. We are gonna be canning mushroom broth. The super cool people at North Sport sent me this awesome Boomr bin to try where you can grow your own mushrooms in a controlled environment like inside. And this has been so much fun. And we have our first fruiting from two different kinds of mushrooms. We have blue oyster mushrooms and we have lion's mane mushrooms. And the cool thing about these is once you harvest these blocks that are in there, they'll refruit several times. So it's pretty cool. We're gonna get several flushes. I got about 1.5 pounds from my blue oysters and I got about a pound from my lion's mane. And I thought this would be the perfect day. It's starting to get fall. We're gonna be making soups and all sorts of things. It is time to start canning mass quantities of broth. And so we're gonna start with mushroom broth this year. And if you've been around before, you know, we've got our big Bertha and she's getting out. We're gonna set this on 235. This is what we like to can our mass quantities of broth in. We're gonna cook it up in here and then we'll put it in the pressure canner to can. So let's talk for a minute about the benefits of mushroom broth. So mushroom broth is packed with minerals like potassium, selenium, zinc, all sorts of things that are gonna help boost our immune system and help our energy and just general health overall. The blue oyster and the lion's mane specifically contain beta glucans, which are going to actually really support our immune system even more. So this is a fantastic thing to be canning right before cold and flu season comes, because hey, we get a cold, we can pop some of this open, we can make some chicken noodle soup or whatever, we can just sip on broth. And this is gonna be a great immune support. This is gonna be a fantastic way to get some health into our diet on a daily basis. Lion's mane actually is like a brain superfood. And we talked about lion's mane before when we made burgers from our first lion's mane, and I'll link that video down below. But lion's mane, the studies for lion's mane and brain health are just crazy. If you read about some of them, it's shown to support, like, boost memory function and support nerve health. So this is gonna be an excellent broth for us to have on our shelf. And just like all broth, it is really easy to make. I'm gonna go ahead and put my mushrooms down in my big roaster pan. Now, you do not have to have a big roaster. You can do this in a crock pot. You can do this on the stove. I'm setting my roaster to 235 degrees. I'm gonna put these right in here. I love these lion's mane. You see why it's called a lion's mane? The little furries that come down from it is so cool. All right, so let's go ahead and put the lion's mane in. Now I'm just gonna add some veggies that I have laying around. I've got some celery, and I don't need to chop this up teeny. I'm just gonna kind of chop it up into big pieces and put them in. And you do wanna clean them before you put them in. The onions, I am gonna chop off that bottom end just so it doesn't go in. But other than that, I'm gonna quarter them. And you can leave the skins on and everything. But I always chop that bottom part off for broth because that's just the part that grows in the dirt, the roots, and it's easier to chop it off and not worry about getting it super clean. And then I've got some carrots. Same thing with the carrots. Some big chunks of carrots. And you don't have to be particular with this. There's no specific recipe. You can do whatever scraps you got laying around. I'm gonna do 3 cloves of garlic. And I do smash the garlic so it can release some of its juices. Oh, I got another carrot laying around here. Let's do that one too. While we're at it, now I'm gonna add some seasonings, and I've got a couple of bay leaves that I'm gonna add. And all of these things are gonna get strained out in our broth. We're gonna add some thyme, some peppercorns. I don't wanna add a ton of salt, but I am gonna add some salt. Generally speaking, I wanna add like a gallon of water per pound of mushroom, but I can do a little bit more. So since I have 2.5, I'm gonna go ahead and add 3 gallons of water for this. And the goal is to really cover this up by 1/2 inch or so. I absolutely love this roaster, especially during our mass like freezer meal sessions or our broth canning. It is just worth its weight in gold. I am gonna pour a little teeny bit, just a splash of apple cider vinegar in here. I don't wanna overpower the mushrooms, but this can release some of the nutrients, so we're gonna do that. And we are gonna let this simmer for 6 to 8 hours. And then once this simmers for 6 to 8 hours, then we'll talk about how to can it. I love this roasting pan, like I said, and you really don't have to babysit it like a pot on the stove. So here's the lid on it. It's set to 235, and we're just gonna let it simmer all afternoon, and we will be back this evening after dinner to can it. All right, it's been about 7 hours, so we are gonna lift this lid and look at that beautiful stock. And we're gonna strain this out into our jars. All right, now this part is pretty simple. I have 8 quart jars. I think that should pretty well deal with this whole thing of broth. If I have a little bit of extra, I can put it in a thing in the fridge and we'll use it. But 8 quart jars, I have these sterilized and warm. I don't want to put hot broth into cold jars because then it can crack. And also my canner water heated up, so it is warm as well. So you always want to keep, if you're putting warm things in the jars, you put it in warm water because any big temperature shift could crack the jar. So we're gonna take some cheesecloth and we're gonna strain this broth through the cheesecloth. I have a funnel. I'm just putting the cheesecloth right on top of the funnel. And I want to give about 1 inch of headspace. Now, headspace is the distance between the liquid in the jar and the top, the rim of the jar. So I want to give about 1 inch. So let's just start filling. Okay, so I have one of these canning measurers, but you don't have to have one. You use a regular ruler to see where yours is, but this goes down in and it shows me that this is right at 1 inch. I know how to eyeball 1 inch on my jars, but here, right here, we have 1 inch, and this is a handy dandy tool. You can see it has like a 1/4 inch and 3/4 inch, and whatever you're canning has different headspace requirements, so you can easily see. Now, next thing, after I fill up a jar, I'm just gonna take a wet cloth and just run it over the edge of the jar on the top rim. This just is gonna allow me to remove any pieces that might be there or any liquid that might be there so that the jar can seal. Just a damp cloth, we don't want it soaking. And now we have our new jar lid, and you can use a used ring as long as it's in good shape. Now I do want to mention I have switched jar lids, and this makes such a huge difference. Lately, the usual jar lids like Ball and some of those others that you would just pick up at Walmart, they were getting cheaper and cheaper, and the seals on them were getting thinner and thinner and thinner. And as I was canning, I was having more and more fails. And when you go through all this effort to can, you don't want any fails. So I have started using these 4 jar lids. They're amazing. I will put a link down below. These, you can just feel the difference when you pick them up. They're nice and thick. The padding here where the seal is, you can just feel that there's so much more than when you pick up those new ones and you look at the ones you get in a store. Sometimes they're so thin you can see the metal through them. So these really are high quality, excellent jar lids, and you can buy them like in the 100 pack. So they'll last a really long time. But this is what I use. You put a jar right on top, and you take your ring, and you're gonna tighten it finger tight. And then I'm gonna take this jar and I'm gonna put it down in my canner. Now inside my pressure canner, I have about 1.5 inches of water, 1 inch to 1.5 inches. You don't cover the jars in your pressure canner. You just need enough so that your pressure canner doesn't run out of water to produce that steam. All right, so let's go ahead and let's fill all these and get them in our pressure canner. Okay, so we filled up 7 quart jars, which fills up our canner, and I'm gonna take the rest and I'm gonna put it in this gallon jar, and we'll just put this in the fridge so that we can use it this week. All right, almost a full gallon there. So we got a lot out of this batch of mushrooms, and the leftovers we can compost or we can feed it to the chickens. And I'm gonna set this out of the way so it can cool before I put it in the fridge. So let's talk pressure canning. First of all, if you are too nervous to pressure can, don't worry about it. You can freeze these. They freeze beautifully if you've got like super cubes that you can pour them into, or any kind of Tupperware or thing like that, you can freeze them. But if you want to try your hand at pressure canning, I will walk you through the steps. You do want to read the instructions for your pressure canner. This is an All-American. They're all slightly different, but basically they work the same. First of all, we make sure we have water in the bottom of this pressure canner, and the trivet that came with the pressure canner is on the bottom. So the jars aren't sitting directly on the bottom. You don't want the jars to sit directly on the bottom of this because they could crack. So I've got the jars in here, it's full, and I'm about to put the lid on. The thing that I want to do with the lid, I always want, where the hole is right here, I always want to hold it up to the light and make sure every single time that I can see through the hole. This is the pressure release valve, and if I can't see through the hole, something's blocking it, and I want to clean that out, okay? So, and there is a safety, extra safety blow off thing here, but that's first number one thing you want to do. Now with the All-American pressure canner, since it does not have any rubber seals or anything, we're going to lubricate it with olive oil. So I'm just going to take olive oil and I'm just going to go all the way around the rim. This helps it seal better and it helps it move better. And on the All-American pressure canner lid, there is an arrow here, and then there's a little divot in the canner body, and I'm going to line those up. So I'm going to take this and shift it down, and these hook underneath and twist it to where the arrow is pointed right at that little divot. So just like you're tightening lug nuts on a tire, you're going to do opposites, and you're going to tighten them down just a little bit and pull up the opposite sides and tighten them down just a little bit. And this just ensures that you don't get a crooked seal here because you're kind of giving even pressure all the way around. And then the opposite sides, and tighten them down just a little bit. And once they're all in place, then you can go around and you can tighten them the rest of the way. So pressure canners have this pressure gauge here. They also have a weight. Ours have a weight on them. And this weight has 5, 10, and 15. For our elevation here, it's 10 pounds of pressure. You do want to look up for your elevation how many pounds of pressure to use. Now this specific recipe for a quart, when you're canning this mushroom broth, it's going to be 35 minutes for a quart. I'm not going to put this on yet. What you want to do is take this to the stove, and we're going to start boiling the water in here and get it hot. And once that starts happening, this little knob will start spewing steam. And when that starts spewing steam, you're going to set the timer for 10 minutes. And that just allows everything in here to pressure up. Once that has spewed steam for 10 minutes, you're going to take your little weight, which right here, I'm going to put it on the 10-pound side, and I'm going to stick it right on there. And that is what's going to maintain that pressure. And you're going to listen until you hear this weight go jiggle, 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 right? So you want to get this to where this pressure canner weight is jiggling about 1 to 4 times every minute. You don't want it just solidly jiggling. That's too high. So turn it down if it's solidly jiggling. If it's not jiggling enough, turn it up a little bit. So you'll have to play that game, but you should be able to narrow in on that pretty quickly. Once it's doing that, it is at pressure. And this is going to pressure can, like I said, for 35 minutes at pressure. And when that's done, you're gonna let it set until this pressure gauge goes down to 0. When the pressure gauge goes down to 0, you finally can take this weight off and let the weight set. You don't want to open it right away. You want to let it set for 10 or 15 minutes. And then once it sets for 10 or 15 minutes, you also don't just want to yank the top off. The idea is to make it go slowly, right? We don't want it to rapidly cool, because what happens when it rapidly cools is siphoning. So sometimes the jar lid will lift up and the liquid in there will shoot out. So we want to avoid that if at all possible. So take the weight off, wait 10 or 15 minutes, then you're going to crack the lid, wait 10 or 15 minutes, then you can open the lid and pull your jars out. So any kind of incremental steps. So I'm gonna have Lance haul this big thing over to the stove so we can get started canning. And I'll see you back here when it's done. All right, we are all canned and cooled down. Now let's pull our jars out. Look at that beautiful broth. We have 7 delicious quarts of broth ready to go on the shelf, and we have almost a whole gallon of broth in our fridge ready to go for this week. So I'd say that was a success for our first big batch of mushrooms from our Boomr bin. If you got some value out of this video, be sure to hit that like button and that subscribe button. Thank y'all so much for joining us. Have a great day.